So guys, as you can tell by the title, we are going full controversy tonight. Should we be eating carbohydrates, guys? The reason I wanted to do this workshop is because I think we're a little bit confused sometimes on the types of carbohydrates, when we should eat them, how, should we? I mean, if you look in the mainstream media sometimes, they are absolutely demonized, and you wouldn't be amiss thinking that we don't like them to a certain degree. But this is why I want to dive really in depth inside the carbohydrate tonight to understand all sorts of things like glycemic indexes, glycemic loads. And over about the next 20, 30 minutes, guys, if you can bear with me for that long, you're going to see all sorts of crazy things like Snickers bars and cake and Nutella and chocolate and all sorts of things. And it will all become apparent why very shortly. So, carbs, question with two possible answers. Should we be eating them? Yes or no? And the answer to that is absolutely fucking yes. We should be eating carbohydrates. However, there are a couple of things that we need to know about as we are going along and we are consuming our carbohydrates for long-term health, happiness, longevity, lower body fat, and generally a better quality of life. So the first thing is we need to know what is GI, glycemic index, as we can be seen. I don't think, I can point, look, what is glycemic index? This little pink thing, which you may or may not be aware of, which looks like it's kind of sprouting a bit of a tree up inside of your body, is your pancreas. The reason that's really, really important to glycemic index is because the glycemic index of carbohydrates is how fast the carbohydrate is going to affect your pancreas. Now, what does your pancreas do? You may or may not know. It secretes insulin. Insulin is both very good and horrifically bad for our body. It's very good in the fact that it stops us comatosing when we eat too much sugar. It's also very good post-workout because instead of taking the sugar away and going into our body fat or our liver or storing it, it drives it straight to muscle groups, which is a good thing because it helps us repair and recover quickly. However, insulin can be extremely bad for you in the sense that if you are not post-workout, you eat too much high glycemic index food, which we're going to dive into. You don't have to understand this concept completely right now. There's loads of stuff going on about this during the workshop. If you eat too much high glycemic index food, your pancreas is going to fire out that insulin. It's going to draw the blood sugar away, but unfortunately it's going to store it as body fat. When you overuse this function of the human body and the anatomy, you start to then wear your insulin resistance down. You become not very resistant to it. So basically you secrete insulin all the time. Then bad things start to happen because just like anything else, your pancreas can wear out, just like a car, for example, okay? You overuse your car, it does a couple 100,000 miles, it's gonna break down. The same thing for this poor little pink leaf looking sprout growing thing that's inside of your, just above your intestines and below your stomach right there. It's going to wear out, and that is when type 2 diabetes comes in. I'm not saying you're all going to become diabetic. What I'm saying is we are mindful of the carbohydrates that we utilize inside of my own private community, guys, the Belief Beyond Life Transformation, and for everybody else, because we want long-term results. We want health. We want positivity. We want our vital organs, and your pancreas is a vital organ, to continue working for us for the rest of our lives and working efficiently too. So that's glycemic index. So it's how fast your carbohydrates affect your insulin level. Speed. That's really, really important, okay? The speed in which your carbohydrates are going to affect your insulin levels, okay? Oh, shit. The plot thickens. Glycemic load, not just index. So now, a few years ago, the GI diet came out and it was like, watch out for your glycemic index, how fast all of your foods are going to hit your pancreas and make you secrete insulin. And that worked great until people decided that actually, not only can your carbohydrates hit your insulin fast, it can hit it hard too. And do you know what the crazy thing is? And this is where I'm going to blow your mind later, is that not everything that you think should hit it hard, as in the load, does. In fact, it's the complete opposite. However, we're going to come to a conclusion about that as we go along. So basically, all you need to know for now is glycemic index is how fast your carbohydrates are going to affect your pancreas or your insulin levels. And your glycemic load is how much insulin you're going to need to combat those carbohydrates. So how much your insulin affected is your glycemic load. So we've got glycemic index, which is the speed, and load is how much volume of insulin you're going to need from your pancreas, okay? Two very, very important things. So why is this important, you might be asking, guys? Why are we talking about a pancreas? Why are we talking about insulin? You're not type 2 diabetic. So why does it matter? Well, these are the reasons for it. Low energy. Why might you become low energy if you eat high glycemic index, high glycemic load foods? Well, to start with, that what's being taken away from your bloodstream when you eat food, the reason your insulin is being secreted is it's taking blood sugar so that your sugar levels don't go so high that you comatose. Yes, you can comatose from too much sugar. And this is why type 2 diabetics need insulin. They need glycosides to take blood sugar away from themselves so they don't comatose, because their insulin isn't doing it anymore. I know this sounds like a science lesson, but bear with me. So what happens? You eat some sugary or starchy food or whatever it might be that's triggered that insulin. Insulin comes along, it's like, don't worry, we'll protect you, and it draws this blood sugar out of your body. Well, your blood sugar is your energy. So you're actually going to feel worse off eating something high glycemic, and we'll understand what that is in food sources shortly, than you would feeling like you're going to get some energy. For example, Lucozade. How many people think Lucozade is an energy drink? Probably everyone. Okay, well, the fact of the matter is, if you drink a Lucozade, if you sat here right now and you drank a Lucozade, the only thing you're going to do is feel great for about 10 minutes until your pancreas goes, oh my God, I think the last count was 16 teaspoons of sugar in a 500 ml bottle of still Lucozade. And your insulin, your body is going to have to do something with that. If it doesn't need it, it needs to get out of your bloodstream. So along comes insulin, draws it out, and then you crash. So you will have low energy. Fatigue, exactly the same principle. If you do this over and over again, like I said, you become less insulin resistant. So it just pumps it out all the time. Okay, which means you keep getting dips of energy and it gets lower and lower and lower. So that's why you can get fatigue. Bad skin. Why would you get bad skin? Because you are inflaming your pancreas. There is inflammation taking place inside of your body and it needs to be reduced. Sex life. Whoa, okay. This took a turn for the naughty. Well, yes, your sex life can have massive the glycemic index and load of your carbohydrates that you consume. The carbohydrates that you consume can have a massively detrimental effect on your sex life. How? Because of the irregulation of hormones. If you are storing more body fat, you're becoming more toxic, your hormonal levels will start to shut down because they can't keep up with the inflammation inside of your body. Trust me, I've been there. Okay? Cravings. You're going to get more cravings. Okay, this is a vicious cycle. As soon as you spike that insulin, it goes down, and we're going to see this later on. I'm going to show you the graphs associated with the time, the longevity, and the sugar inside your body. This is all going to become super crystal clear for you guys, okay? Stress will increase. Why? Because you're inflaming your body with the wrong types of foods. Inflammation, like we've just said with stress. Illness. How are you going to get ill? Well, because the more body fat you accrue, the more inflamed you're going to become, the more these hormonal receptors, more the pancreas is going to wear out, so natural inflammation is going to take place. So your central nervous system starts to shut down. So does your response to that, guys. Your immunity essentially starts to shut down because it's fighting inflammation inside of your body. Okay? Joint pains. Yes, you are going to get joint pains because if you're eating all of this other food, which is going to make you feel sluggish and lethargic and stuff, you're going to be on these low nutrient dense foods and stuff, guys. You're going to be lacking in micronutrients. You're not going to be intaking in much essential fat, which are satisfying, which means you are going to have joint pains. And we've already spoken about excessive body fat. So that's why it could be important. If you have any of those symptoms or have had any of those symptoms, this is why you need to pay really close attention to this, okay? So when should I be thinking about this with my food? It seems like I can't eat anything nice. Now, the honest answer to this, guys, is about 90 to 95% of the time. It's not that you can't eat any nice food, but being aware and mindful of this and not playing to short-term gratification. Inside of the transformation, we call it a shiny object syndrome. Not playing to this means, and delaying gratifications means that you have a much better quality of life. All of those things on the previous slide, I don't know whether I can go back. I might mess it up if I do. Let's try it. Oh, all of these things on this previous slide: low energy, fatigue, bad skin, sex life, craving, stress, inflammation, illness, joint pains, excessive body. You can avoid from not diving in and being a magpie and jumping on this shiny object. So be mindful. I'm not saying never. What I'm saying is match up your goals, your outcomes that you want for your body, for your mind. Do you want less fatigue? Do you want to sleep better? Yeah, there's certain times when you should be eating certain carbohydrates, etc. We're not going to go into that. But it all makes a difference to the quality and the longevity of your life moving forward. So think about it more often than you don't, and you're going to have a much, much better quality of life. And you'll find you'll hit these physical, personal transformation goals so much faster. Okay, so how do I implement this? Because this all sounds quite complicated right now, right? And you're right, it is. It's very science-based. It's not mainstream knowledge. And the reason for it is because it's very, very difficult to get people to understand. So I've got a little bit of a fun exercise for us to be able to understand glycemic index and glycemic load just a little bit better. And this may have a little bit of audience participation because we have a couple of audiences in the background for this. So here comes the fun part. Here is a glycemic index question. So we have right here a Snickers bar. Woo! Wow, wait. We also have sponge cake. It's quite a thick piece of sponge as well. It's a good inch thick sponge cake right about now. We have, sorry, this was as festive as it got. This is pumpkin. I've got to pick up a pumpkin, and this is frozen pumpkin. So this is pumpkin. And we have Nutella in a jar. Okay? So this is a glycemic index question. Now, for those of us in our audience, what do you think is the most high glycemic index thing? So we've got Nutella, we've got a Snickers bar, we've got cake, lemon cake, by the way. Ooh, it's got sugar on top too. And we have a little bit of pumpkin. Now, the volume of these things is irrelevant, okay? Because this is how fast it's going to affect your insulin. What do people think right about now is the fastest thing that's going to affect your insulin? The quickest, not necessarily the most, the quickest. So this is glycemic index. Are we looking at the Snickers bar? Who reckons the Snickers? I'm going to vote for the Snickers. Okay, we like that. What about the Nutella? Oh, Nikki's nodding away. Cake? No. Okay, so we're edging towards the chocolate stuff. What about the pumpkin? No. Okay. So, in order of the least affected, so the slowest, okay? Nutella. Nutella out of pumpkin, out of sponge cake, and a Snickers bar, liquid chocolate affects your insulin the slowest. I'll tell you why afterwards as well. Okay, because there is a reason for that as well. And there's a reason I picked Nutella, not chocolate spread. Because I'm sneaky like that, okay? What do we think's next? Does that change anyone's opinion? Next up. What do we reckon? Pumpkin's got to be somewhere, hasn't it? Well, next up. The second slowest. So this does not affect your insulin as fast as the other two things that are left, which is the sponge cake and pumpkin. Snickers bar. You're not going to like the outcome of this. The third slowest, the sponge cake. Now you're all probably thinking, why are you doing this to me? Why are you demonizing pumpkin? Pumpkin, on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being the fastest thing that can ever possibly affect your insulin, is a whopping 75. Anyone want to guess what a Nutella is? 33. Wow. 33. Now, I've been a little bit sneaky because inside of that, the reason I picked Nutella specifically is because chocolate spread is a little bit higher on the glycemic index scale. Nutella is lower Because it has nuts in it. Nuts slow down the rate in which it affects your insulin level. And that's a really, really important thing to take, guys, that if ever you're having cheat meals or you're having these higher glycemic index foods, okay, you should always mix your carbohydrates with proteins or fats, because it slows down the rate in which it affects your insulin. Not necessarily the load, which we're going to get onto in a second, but it definitely affects the rate in which it hits your insulin. Okay, if you hit your insulin hard and fast all the time, you're going to wear it out quick. It's like driving your car super quick all the time. It's no good for it, is it? Yeah. So that was the glycemic index question, which I've just rocked everybody's world, I do feel. The horrible pumpkin. We are going to come to a very good conclusion inside of this as well, okay? Now, the next one, the glycemic load question. So we've just done glycemic index, okay? We've done a comparison of food. Now I want you to understand load better. So what was load? Load was the amount of insulin that is necessary to deal with the blood sugar or the carbohydrates that you're intaking at that moment in time. So let's go back to our audience. So guys, got a quarter of a cup of nuts, okay? I have the infamous sponge. I also have Snickers bars making another appearance, okay? And I have 2 tablespoons, not teaspoons, tablespoons of raisins. I know it doesn't look like a lot, but there is 2 tablespoons of raisins in here, okay? So what do we think, okay? And these are quantifiable amounts. So this is a portion of sponge cake, okay? You can see, okay? It's a good sized piece of sponge cake. It's not a minute amount, and it's a good sort of like inch thick nearly, okay? Quarter of a cup of nuts. A normal size Snickers bar, no jumbo size, no king size, nothing like that. We've got a couple of tablespoons of raisins. What out of those 4 do you think affects your insulin the most? Not the fastest, okay? The most. What are we going for? Are we thinking nuts, Snickers, sponge cake, raisins?
I think raisins.
Raisins, yeah.
We're flipping it on its head now. You've seen the pumpkin and you're attacking the big stuff now. You are savage, ladies. Savage. And you'd be absolutely right. Okay? Anything with a scale of 0 to 10 on a glycemic load is very low. Anything 10 to 20 is considered like a moderate glycemic load. And then the scale of 20 plus means high. This, 27.1 for 2 tablespoons. Okay, now this is really gonna blow your mind in just a second, okay? What do we reckon's next? What hits it like second hardest, do we think? We've got nuts, Snickers, and sponge left.
I'm eating cake for some reason.
Okay. Snickers bar. Snickers bar's next. So even though the Snickers bar was actually the second lowest on speed to hit our insulin, it hits it really hard. Okay. The reason for that is because of the nutrients inside of it. I'm going to dive a little bit more into that in just a second. Then it's the sponge cake. So the Snickers bar, relatively is 22 from 27. So that's 5 points less. That's almost moderate compared to 2 tablespoons of raisins. Isn't that crazy? Sponge cake is a nice gentle 17. So the sponge actually, working it out, it's only a third fastest and relatively on a glycemic index scale, that's in line with rice and it's half as much as bloody pumpkin, isn't it? And then it's only 17 on the load scale. You might be thinking, well, I could get me a piece of sponge cake right now. Where are we going with this? Anyone want to guess what a quarter of a cup of nuts is? The load, the volume at which this affects insulin. So we know it's the lowest. and we know that 10 to 20 is moderate. We know 20 plus is high. And we know that the raisins are the highest. Anyone want to guess where we think this is?
12.
1. Absolutely rock bottom. Does anyone want to guess what all of that is? The glycemic load.
Go on.
6. You would need, that's a big cup of nuts as well. You would need, so this is 1/4 cup at 1, to make the same glycemic load as just a sponge cake, not even to mention raisins. You would need 4 1/4 cups of nuts. I didn't have enough nuts in the house. Okay, that's about 1.5 cups. 4 1/4 cups of nuts to have the same effect on your insulin level as 1 slice of cake. Which is mad, isn't it? And then when we take this back to logic, your insulin is going to draw blood sugar out and store body fat for you. But you can eat 4 1/4 cups of nuts before you get the same effect as 1 piece of sponge cake. But the plot thickens. So, now that I have blown your mind with glycemic indexes and glycemic loads, pumpkin isn't actually the devil. And just because something is high glycemic index, okay? 1 second, let's go on to the next slide. Just because something is high glycemic load, says. So why am I telling you all of this? The reason I'm telling you all of this is because food is a minefield, okay? And just because, like I was saying, something is high glycemic load, this poor pumpkin, it's getting a bad name. Just because it affects your insulin levels fast. But does it affect it a lot? And this was where one of the crossovers came in. It's like, well, you know, what should I be eating? Should I be eating a piece of sponge cake? Because it's kind of in the middle. You know, it's not really high like the pumpkin, so I won't store that body fat quickly. But at the same time, eating a thing of raisins, you know, seems quite bad because that affects it quite a lot. You know, this is going to be really sort of bad. And the answer to that is, guys, you can't just utilize one system of looking at glycemic index and load. And this is why I'm talking about carbohydrates, because they are the minefield. Okay? And in understanding that they're a minefield, you need to then look very, very carefully about why. And that is, first of all, going back to some of the reasons that we talked about before, energy levels and stuff. So you can see this graph's just popped up here. Okay, guys. Now, when you ingest high glycemic index food, so that's what's on this red line. It doesn't give you a great example of this right now. It's a little bit confused. What happens is your energy goes up. Okay, sorry, your blood sugar comes up and then it drops back down because your insulin works. Okay, so it's coming back down this scale here, and then it starts to normalize and level out when your insulin comes back away. Okay, now with your lower glycemic index, lower glycemic foods, okay, lower glycemic load foods, you're more level, you're regulated. It's not that you won't affect your insulin levels with your foods, all the other foods that you're intaking, but it's less of an effect, okay? Now, the reason we're diving into this rabbit hole and I'm showing you Snickers bars and I'm telling you it all, and I'm trying to confuse you almost, is because I want you to think carefully, rather than food just being a piece of cake, a Snickers, a couple of tablespoons of raisins. I want you to think, what does it serve? What nutrients are in there? What nutrients do we actually think is in this piece of shit processed chocolate bar? And the answer to that is the peanuts. If they weren't processed at high temperatures. The cake is bullshit because it's cooked at a high temperature. The dairy inside of this, we cannot process. Any of the proteins are now irrenderable or irreusable by our bodies, and it's full of sugar. So it's definitely going to cause an insulin spike. It's definitely going to hold body fat. And what nutritional value in there? The egg's been killed because it's dairy. The flour is useless and it's gluttonous, so it's going to cause holes in our gut bacteria. So why would we even eat that? Even though it seems on a glycemic index and load scale, it might be better for you than, say, this horrible piece of pumpkin over here. So why would we eat the pumpkin then? Because of micronutrients. Because of the nutritional value that this offers to our body. Skin, hair, nails. Even though it affects your insulin fast, it doesn't affect it a lot. So this will actually regulate your energy levels, not deplete them. Okay? And it comes down to the fact there is masses of micronutrients in here. The carbohydrates in here serve a purpose for your body. Repair function, recovery, optimizing and balancing hormone levels. Because this is a pure product. Okay? It's not processed in any way, shape or form. So even though you may be tempted to stick the spoon in the jar of Nutella now, because it doesn't affect your insulin very quickly, don't. It's processed sugar. So it's not just a case of looking at this glycemic index and this load and saying, well, you know, I definitely know certain things are bad for me and other things aren't. It's a case of, well, why and what quantifiable value? And then the other question is, why wouldn't you eat 4 1/4 cups of nuts instead of 1 piece of cake? Why wouldn't you do that? Well, the answer is because that's about 2.5 days worth of calories. Now, I know that's not carbohydrates, I know that's fats, and I know that's nuts, okay? But the reason I thought that was really, really important, guys, is because then another segment comes on, doesn't it? Okay, so not only have you got glycemic index, glycemic load, you've got the nutrients of the food, so how good it is, and we already know raw foods, organic foods, unprocessed foods are far better for us. That is common knowledge. But then going a step further and understanding our body's energy needs is so, so important. So not only are we not just throwing a piece of cake down because it might not affect our insulin, we're actually considering our own energy intake and what we need to move forward. And this is what leads us nicely into this next slide, because here's your blood glucose levels and the time. Okay, so if you eat something high glycemic index, okay, so over 70, now we know this nasty little pumpkin is over 70. So what's going to happen is we're going to spike our insulin levels, and then they're going to come crashing down. Now, have you seen these lines here? Okay, these are normalized, so to speak, levels of blood glucose. Notice how when you eat something high glycemic, it dips even lower than this green and this orange line. That's because your body can't pump sugar back into itself. Okay, it doesn't just go, oh, you need a bit more instantly. It can, and there is a process for that called gluconeogenesis. You don't need to know about that. What you need to know is, for a while afterwards, this is your energy. Think of this as your energy level and your energy line, guys. Except this is dopamine, which is a feel-good hormone, which says, oh, I've eaten something sugary and nice. And then it goes, oh, here comes insulin. Boom. Down you come on that curve, and you end up here at the bottom of this line, even lower than you were before. So guess what happens at that point? You go reaching again for that high glycemic index food. Now you might be like, right, so I don't need to eat pumpkin. No. Why was the Nutella lower glycemic index? This is really important. This is why this was there. Because it was mixed with what? Fats, nuts. Normal chocolate spread is much higher than this. It's about another 15 to 20 points higher. It's in the 50s. And this was only 33. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is, if you consumed pumpkin, I'm not really sure about you guys, but I don't just peel a pumpkin and start chomping on it. But if you mix this with some fats or some protein, it slows this down. So this pumpkin essentially then starts to turn into more like an orange or a green line. So shiny object reasons. We like shiny objects. We talked about being a magpie before. Why would we do this? Why would we adhere to lower glycemic index foods, lower glycemic load foods? Well, initially on the forefront, the front end, because we are hardwired as human beings for here and now, like, oh, I'm hungry, so I'll eat. Instead of intermittent fasting, where you actually gain more energy. Crazy concept. We'll dive into that on a workshop later. What about a shiny object for constant energy? Okay, well, how does that work? Well, because instead of doing this, as we've just seen with our insulin levels, high glycemic index foods crash even lower than before. So maybe under the screen there, and then you come back up with more high glycemic food and you go down. And you can imagine these peaks and troughs get even higher and even lower. That is how you don't have energy, but you can have constant energy. Remember this slide, if we go back a couple here, you can see your energy is much more normalized. I know this is blood sugar, but blood sugar is energy. Okay, I want you to understand that concept. So this is much more normalized, isn't it? Through these foods. Now, peppers, broccoli, all contain carbohydrates. Yeah, I know these are essential fats here, but there are carbohydrates in your foods on low glycemic index foods, low glycemic low foods too, okay? So that's one shiny object reason. No crash is the second. You don't get that, I feel great. That's a dopamine hit, guys. That's not energy. And then crashing down the other side. So you get constant and consistent, as we've just said, energy levels. There is no bounce down off it. It's not like a caffeine hit. You take a shot of espresso, a couple hours later, you're crashing down on the floor. Doesn't happen. Cravings gone. Well, why would your cravings go? Because you're not doing this. Yeah, you get cravings because you go low. Your body's like, oh, you should probably feed me because I feel a little bit low. In actual fact, your body just detects you have lower blood sugars. It's like, we need to come back up. Now, instead of you being able to deny it and prevent it, delay gratification, most people, okay, and the hormones responsible for this are leptin and ghrelin, and it's basically firing at you saying, please eat right now because we're low on energy. And most people just see that as, well, I'm hungry, I should eat. It's a receptor, it's a feeling, it's a hormone. If you can shut it off, your body will naturally produce more sugar. But the way to do that is empowerment and willpower, and it's tough. It's not easy. But if you can get past that, and you can start to eat these lower glycemic index foods, you're going to have this with your energy, not the roller coaster, up and down all the time. So your cravings will disappear for high sugary foods, the less high glycemic index, high glycemic load foods you consume, okay? Now, long-term reasons that you would delay gratification for, I'm going to pull this slide up here because we can see it now. Skin complexion. So we talked about before all the reasons why, you know, you should be looking at this, the detriment of what it can do. These are the good things. So skin complexion will increase. Because again, normalization of hormones, etc. Hair color and growth. Well, how does that work? Because your hormones will be optimized. And I even mean stress, because you're putting yourself into inflammation. Remember what we said before, okay, about overworking the pancreas? That's inflammation. If we can reduce inflammation, your hair color will come back, the grays will go, and growth of hair will resume with normalized, optimized hormones, okay? It's not a myth, it's a fact, okay? Reduce your body fat because you're not spiking your insulin and storing body fat all the time. Your body fat will just naturally reduce, even though you're not eating anything less. We're still working to that calorie intake, that energy intake, like we said before. Balanced hormones, we've just said. Cognitive function, how's it going to help your brain? Well, imagine, okay, your brain works off carbohydrates and glucose. Get this is a crazy fact. Your brain, this small part of your body here, this is it, okay? Just inside your head. Okay, I know I'm like rubbing around the back of my head right now, but this small section, okay, of your head, of your whole body, consumes 25% of the glucose in your body. It accounts for 25%. This small section here. The whole of your body moves though. How's that possible? It is, it's fact. So 25% of the glucose that you have is needed by your brain. So can you imagine? The glucose is moving around your body, it's all going great, and then you eat something high glycemic, I don't know, you have some raisins on a cake, okay? You like pour the raisins over the top of the cake and then you eat the cake. Your insulin levels can come up, drive that blood glucose out. What's your brain got left to deal with? Nothing. So that's why you can't concentrate. You need to go to sleep. You feel bad after the Nan's roast dinner on the weekend and you just want to go for a nap on the sofa afterwards because it's so big. That is your insulin working for you guys, and your cognitive function will reduce. You'll reduce physical inflammation. We just spoke about that, okay? Increase your quality of life because we're not ruining these systems. We're not overworking them. The car will continue to run because we're looking after it. We are not slamming it into first gear all the time, throwing our foot off the clutch and doing wheel spins everywhere. We are saying, we'll gently pull off from this junction, sensibly, as we're responsible drivers, because we're looking after the vehicle, guys, okay? The occasional wheel spin's all right, the occasional bit of cake, okay, maybe with some Nutella rubbed over it, that's fine, but on a very rare occasion. And if you stick to the principles and protocols inside of this transformation, it's once a week, okay? Because that's actually good for your body, for it to be tested. Your insulin levels should be tested, okay? Once a week, not daily, not hourly or bi-hourly or however often some people snack, okay? Happiness and fulfillment, and I've put underneath there gut bacteria. We spoke briefly about this before. The wrong types of foods, I'm not going to dive into this too far, this will be another workshop, but you can destroy your gut bacteria with the wrong carbohydrates, okay? Specifically, carbohydrates are the main culprit of this, okay? And by doing so, you're going to cause inflammation, and then you're going to suffer with mental health problems more often than not. It is clinically and scientifically linked. Gut bacteria is supposedly now being called your second brain because it is closely linked to mental health, okay? And so if you don't take care of your gut bacteria, you're not careful about the glycemic index and load of the carbohydrates that you have, happiness and fulfillment will tail off as well. That sounds quite serious, but nutrition is the elixir to life, to recovery, to health, etc., etc. So one thing, just one point I want to leave you with, guys, is the reason, I know this is quite heavy, I know it was a big workshop, and I know that is, really mind blowing and opening with certain concepts with the foods and stuff like that, some of these props in here, but I want you to align the habits you're trying to create with the vision that you have for yourself. And in doing that, you're putting weight and leverage on what you're trying to create for the long term. Keep thinking, if I eat this piece of cake, will it matter? Yes, it will. Because that cake then isn't just, I'm going to eat the cake. The insulin trail starts to come up, down, and low. So then guess what you're going to do? You're going to go back and eat the rest of the cake. It's not just going to be 2 tablespoons of raisins, because does that look satisfying? I mean, look, come on. We can get rid of that in a quick and gone, can't we? Okay? And we're not just going to stop there, because then our energy is going to go a little bit low and we're going to want picking back up again. So yes, each and every single decision you make will and can affect you.